Part 1. The Vow She Never Heard. The wind carried more than dust across the Colorado plains that February morning in 1883. It carried the weight of a woman's secrets, heavier than the worn leather satchel Claire Whitaker clutched against her chest. She stood at the edge of what used to be her life, watching the Whitaker farmstead disappear behind a rise of dead grass and bitter memories. Her mother-in-law's parting words still rang in her ears. "You're cursed, girl. First the baby, then my son. Everything you touch withers and dies." Claire pulled her threadbare shawl tighter, though it did nothing against the cold that had settled into her bones months ago. The old woman hadn't been entirely wrong. Death did seem to follow her these days. But Margaret Whitaker didn't know the whole truth about her son's passing. No one did. The memory came unbidden, as it always did when she tried not to think about it. Samuel's face, twisted with drink and rage. The lamp oil spilled across the floor, his hands reaching for her throat one last time. Then the push, just a push. Nothing more, and the sickening crack when his head met the corner of the iron stove. She'd told them he died of fever in those final weeks of autumn. With half the county sick, no one questioned another death. She'd washed his body herself, hidden the gash beneath his hair, and played the grieving widow through a winter that took their child, too. A girl who lived only 3 days, born too early in a blizzard that trapped them for a week. Now, cast out with nothing but accusations and $23 sewn into her corset, Claire walked toward the horizon. Red Willow lay somewhere beyond these hills, a town where no one knew her name, where the trains ran west, where a woman might disappear entirely. Her boots, Samuel's boots actually, too large and stuffed with rags, made soft sounds against the frozen earth. Each step took her further from the grave where her daughter lay unmarked, from the house where she'd learned that love could turn to poison, from the life she'd thought she'd wanted when she'd married at 17. The first sign of Red Willow came with the smell of coal smoke and cattle, then the distant whistle of the Denver and Rio Grande, promising escape to anyone with fare. Claire touched the hidden money through her dress. Enough for a ticket, maybe a week's lodging. After that, God only knew. The town materialized slowly through the afternoon haze, a collection of wooden buildings huddled against the vastness like sheep against wolves. Main Street stretched before her, rutted and half-frozen, lined with establishments that served the cowboys, miners, and drifters who called this place a temporary home. The Imperial Hotel stood 3 stories tall, too rich for her purse. Beside it, Mrs. Eliza's boarding house advertised clean beds for Christian ladies. Claire almost laughed. She wondered what Mrs. Eliza would think of a Christian lady with her husband's blood on her conscience. She passed the saloon, the broken wheel where piano music spilled out despite the early hour. Men lounged against the hitching posts, watching her with the casual interest reserved for any new face, any new story walking into town. She kept her eyes forward, chin up, moving with the purposeful stride of someone who belonged. But she didn't belong. Not here, not anywhere anymore. The general store's warmth beckoned, and she stepped inside, pretending to examine bolts of calico while the feeling returned to her fingers. The proprietor, a thin man with pomaded hair, watched her from behind his counter. "Help you, ma'am." "Just looking, thank you." Her voice came out steadier than expected. "New in town, haven't seen you before." Claire touched a bolt of black wool, thinking of all the mourning clothes she'd never wear. "Passing through. Most folks are, though winter's a hard time for traveling. You got people waiting for you." The lie came easily. "My sister, in California." He nodded, apparently satisfied. "Well, if you need anything for the journey, we're well stocked, though I'd wait for better weather myself." She murmured something appropriate and left, the bell above the door marking her departure like a judgment. The boarding house was her next stop. Mrs. Eliza turned out to be a woman of 60 with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many hard-luck stories to be moved by another. $2 a week, meals included, No gentleman callers, no liquor, no loud behavior, payment in advance. Claire fingered the bills in her pocket. 2 weeks would leave her with too little for the train. 1 week might not be enough to find work. I'm seeking employment. Perhaps you know of... Can you sew? Yes. Cook, clean, launder. All of those. Mrs. Eliza's expression didn't soften, but something shifted. Mrs. Patterson sometimes needs help with mending. The hotel takes on extra laundry when they're full. It's honest work, but it won't make you rich. I'm not looking to get rich. No, the older woman said, studying her with those knowing eyes. I suppose you're not... You running from something... Girl. The question hit like a slap. Claire forced herself not to flinch. My husband passed his family. She let the sentence die, knowing sometimes the untold story was more believable than any lie. Ah, Mrs. Eliza's nod held the weight of understanding. Well, you're not the first widow to find herself unwelcome in her own home. 1 week, then see how things go. Claire paid, watching her small reserve dwindle. The room was as advertised. Clean, sparse, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out on the back alley where cats fought over scraps. She sat on the bed, testing its firmness, and for the first time since leaving the farm, allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. She was 23 years old, a widow, a killer, though justified or not. Only God could say. She had $19, the clothes on her back, 2 spare dresses in her satchel, and a past that would follow her like smoke if she wasn't careful. Outside, the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting the sky the color of old blood. Somewhere in this town, she'd need to build a new life from nothing, become someone else, someone who hadn't pushed her husband in a moment of desperate self-preservation, someone who hadn't buried a baby in ground too frozen to dig proper. A burst of laughter from the street below made her look out. Cowboys heading to the saloon, spurs jangling, voices carrying stories of cattle drives and card games. Normal life continuing its course, unaware of the woman sitting alone in a rented room, trying to forget the sound a skull makes when it meets cast iron. Claire unpinned her hair brown shot with premature gray, though she wasn't yet 24. In the small mirror above the washstand, she hardly recognized herself. The soft girl who'd married Samuel Whitaker had vanished sometime between the first blow and the last winter storm. What remained was harder, quieter, carved down to necessary parts. She'd need to be harder still to survive here. Red Willow didn't look like a town that suffered fools or forgave weakness, but it also didn't look like a town that asked too many questions if you kept your head down and your business private. Tomorrow, she'd look for work. Tonight, she'd try to sleep without seeing Samuel's face, without hearing her daughter's single, fragile cry, without feeling the weight of Margaret Whitaker's curse following her west. The wind picked up again, rattling the window. Somewhere out there, beyond the town limits, the open range stretched endless and unforgiving, a place where people went to disappear, to die, or to be reborn as someone entirely new. Claire Whitaker lay down fully clothed, her hand touching the remaining money through her dress. By spring, she told herself, everything would be different. By spring, she'd be someone else entirely. She didn't know then that tomorrow's dust storm would drive her into a stranger's barn, or that the taciturn cowboy who owned it would look at her with eyes that saw too much and asked too little. She didn't know that love could grow in ground just as harsh as hatred had. All she knew was that she'd survived this far, and in a place like Red Willow. Sometimes survival was the only victory that counted. The saloon piano played on, a melancholy tune that drifted up through her window like a promise or a warning. Claire closed her eyes and waited for dawn, unaware that somewhere across town, Thomas Dyer was drinking alone, making his own vows to never trust another woman with his heart. Neither of them knew that fate had other plans. Neither of them knew that sometimes the most profound promises are the ones whispered in darkness, unheard and unintended. waiting for the right moment to become real. Part 2. A Bed of Straw. A Stranger's Barn. The dust storm hit Red Willow 3 days after Claire's arrival, turning the afternoon sky the color of dried blood. She'd been walking back from the hotel, arms aching from scrubbing linen since dawn, when the wind shifted. What started as a gentle breeze became a howling wall of dirt and debris that sent folks scrambling for shelter. Claire pressed herself against the side of Murphy's feed store, her shawl pulled over her nose and mouth. The street emptied in seconds, leaving her alone with the fury of the plains. She couldn't see the boarding house, couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. The storm had swallowed the world whole. Panic clawed at her chest. She'd heard stories of people lost in dust storms, found days later just yards from safety. But standing here would be just as deadly. She needed shelter, any shelter, before the wind tore the clothes from her back. Through the whirling dust, she glimpsed a shape to her left, a fence post. Then another. A fence meant property. Property meant buildings. She followed it blindly, one hand on the rough wood, fighting for every step against the wind. The fence led to a gate, hanging open and banging against its post like a drumbeat. Beyond it, the dim outline of a barn materialized. She didn't hesitate, didn't wonder whose land she was trespassing on. Survival came before propriety. The barn door fought her, but desperation gave her strength. She hauled it open just enough to slip inside, then threw her weight against it to close it. The sudden quiet was almost painful. Dust still filtered through the cracks, dancing in the thin light, but the howling was muted now, almost distant. Claire collapsed against the door, coughing, spitting dirt. Her eyes watered, turning the barn's interior into a blur of shadows. Gradually, shapes emerged, stalls along one wall, most empty, hay bales stacked high in the loft above, and in the far corner, a makeshift living space, a cot with a wool blanket, a small table with a lantern, someone's private retreat. She should leave, find another shelter, but the storm still raged outside, and her legs trembled with exhaustion. Just a few minutes, she told herself, just until the worst passed. The hay in the corner looked softer than anything in her boarding house room. She made her way to it, each step careful and quiet, though who could hear anything over that wind? The hay smelled of summer, of better times, and when she sank into it, Claire almost cried from the simple comfort. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, the barn door was opening. Not the violent swing of wind, but controlled, deliberate. A man's silhouette filled the doorway, backlit by the still dusty evening light. He stood there for a long moment, taking in the scene, a strange woman curled in his hay, looking like something the storm had spit out. Claire waited for the shouting, the demands, maybe worse. She'd heard what some men did when they found women where they shouldn't be. Instead, he stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind him. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out his features, tall, lean in the way of men who worked cattle, dark hair that needed cutting, a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't set in such hard lines. Maybe 30, maybe older. Hard to tell with men who lived under the sun. He moved to the table, lit the lantern with practiced ease. The warm light pushed back the shadows, made everything more real and somehow more dangerous. "Storms letting up," he said finally. His voice was low, roughened by dust or disuse. "Be clear enough to walk in an hour or so." Claire pushed herself up straighter, trying for dignity despite the hay in her hair. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "You running from something, or to something?" The question stopped her cold. Not "who are you" or "what are you doing here" or any of the accusations she'd expected. Just that simple distinction that somehow cut to the heart of everything. "The storm," she said, which was true but not the truth. He studied her with eyes the color of winter sky, gray and distant. Then he moved to one of the occupied stalls, checking on a bay mare who nickered softly at his approach. His hands were gentle on the horse's neck, and something in that gentleness made Claire's throat tight. "There's water in the bucket by the door," he said without turning. Clean enough to drink. Dust makes a person thirsty. She wanted to refuse, to maintain some distance, but her throat felt like she'd swallowed half the prairie. The water was cool, sweet, better than anything she'd tasted in days. When she looked up, he was watching her again, leaning against the stall door. "You're the widow staying at Eliza's." It wasn't a question. Claire nodded, wondering what else he knew. What stories were already spreading about her. "She runs a decent place. Safe." He paused, considering. "Mostly safe. I can take care of myself." "Didn't say you couldn't." He turned back to the mare, running his hands along her legs, checking for injury with the same quiet competence. "Just saying this isn't an easy town for women alone, especially women who look like they're carrying ghosts." The accuracy of it made her stomach clench. "And what do you know about ghosts?" "Enough." He straightened, wiped his hands on his pants. "Name's Thomas Dyer. Tom to most. This is my place, such as it is." "Claire," she offered, then wondered if she should have lied. "Claire Whitaker." He nodded, filed the information away without comment. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Outside, the wind was indeed dying down, reduced to occasional gusts that rattled the barn walls. "I should go," Claire said, though she made no move to stand. The hay was warm. The barn felt safe despite the stranger's presence, and the thought of returning to her cold, narrow room held no appeal. Storm's not done yet. These things come in waves sometimes. Could pick up again before full dark. He moved to his makeshift living area, pulled something from a wooden crate. "You hungry?" Pride said no. Her stomach said otherwise, loud enough that he probably heard. He didn't smile, exactly, but something in his expression softened a fraction. "It's just bread and dried beef, nothing fancy." "I couldn't." "You could." He set the food on the table, stepped back like she was a wild animal that might spook. "Consider it payment for the entertainment. Don't get many visitors out here, willing or otherwise." She should have been offended by his tone, by the implication that her desperation was amusing. Instead, she found herself almost smiling. There was something honest about his directness, something that reminded her of the time before Samuel's moods, before the pretending, before everything went wrong. The bread was only a day old, the beef tough but flavorful. He sat on his cot. She stayed in the hay, and they ate in silence while the storm played itself out. The lantern light made a small circle of civilization in the growing darkness. "You always live in your barn?" she asked eventually. "House burned, 2 winters back." He said it matter of fact, like commenting on the weather. "Haven't gotten around to rebuilding. Barn suits me fine." "What about when it's cold?" "Got a stove." He gestured to a pot-bellied contraption she hadn't noticed. "Keeps it warm enough. Horses don't complain." Just the one horse. 3. Other 2 are in the far stalls. The bay's my best. Name's Temperance. A hint of warmth crept into his voice. Previous owner thought it was funny, giving a horse a virtue name. "And you kept it." Seemed fitting. She's got more temperance than most humans I've known. Claire studied him in the lamplight. This strange man who housed himself with horses and spoke in riddles. His clothes were clean but mended. His boots good quality but worn. A man who'd had better days but wasn't drowning in them. "Your husband," he said suddenly. "How long?" 4 months. The lie came easier now. "Fever took him." He nodded, accepting it without the usual platitudes about God's will or time healing. She appreciated that more than she could say. "And his family. Thought I brought bad luck." True enough. "Did you?" The question should have angered her. Instead, she found herself considering it honestly. "Maybe. Seems like everything I touch." She trailed off, unable to finish. "That's grief talking. Makes everything look cursed for a while." He stood, stretched. "Storm's done. I'll walk you back to town." "That's not necessary." "Probably not. But Eliza would have my hide if something happened to you between here and there. Woman's got a tongue like a bullwhip when she's riled." Claire rose from the hay, brushing off her skirts as best she could. She probably looked like a scarecrow. But Tom didn't seem to notice or care. He banked the lantern, grabbed a coat from a peg. "Thank you," she said as they stepped into the evening air. The dust had settled, leaving the world coated in a fine layer of prairie earth. "For the shelter and the food," he shrugged. "Would have done the same for anyone." But as they walked toward town, him keeping a respectful distance while still somehow making her feel protected, Claire wondered if that was true. There'd been something in his eyes when he'd asked if she was running from, or to something, recognition. Maybe. The look of someone who understood both options intimately. The lights of Red Willow appeared ahead, windows glowing yellow in the dusk. Real life waiting to reclaim them both. Tomorrow she'd go back to scrubbing linens, to pretending she was just another widow trying to make her way. He'd go back to his barn, his horses, his solitary existence on the edge of town. "Your house," she said as they reached the boarding house steps. "Why didn't you rebuild?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the ghost he carried plain as day. Some things aren't meant to be built back the same. Sometimes it's better to start over entirely, or just let them stay buried. Before she could respond, he touched his hat brim and walked away, disappearing into the shadows between buildings. Claire stood on the steps, watching him go, wondering if he knew how much truth he'd just spoken. Inside, Mrs. Eliza was waiting in the parlor, worry creasing her face. "Lord, girl, I thought the storm had carried you off. You look a fright." "I found shelter," Claire said, which was both true and wildly inadequate. The older woman's sharp eyes took in the hay still clinging to her skirts, the dust in her hair. "Thomas Dyer's place, by the look of it. That where you weathered it." Heat crept up Claire's neck. The storm is a convenient excuse, but an honest one. Tom's a decent man, despite what some say, keeps to himself since... She paused, seemed to think better of gossiping. "Well, we all have our stories. Get yourself cleaned up. Supper's gone cold, but there's bread and soup in the kitchen." Claire climbed the stairs to her room, each step heavy with exhaustion and something else. In her small mirror, she saw what Mrs. Eliza had seen, a woman wild from the storm, marked by her refuge in a stranger's barn. But underneath that, something else, a faint spark in her eyes that hadn't been there this morning. She thought of Tom Dyer, alone in his barn with his horses and his ghosts, of the careful way he'd kept his distance while still making her feel safe, of that question that cut through all pretense running from or running to. Both, she thought, always both. But for the first time since leaving the Whitaker farm, she wondered if maybe there was a third option. Maybe sometimes you stopped running altogether. Maybe sometimes you found a place to stand still, even if it was just a barn that smelled of hay and horses and the faint possibility of understanding. Outside her window, the cleaned world sparkled under emerging stars. Somewhere out there, a man who housed himself with horses was probably tending to temperance, speaking in low tones about nothing and everything. Claire touched the glass, leaving fingerprints in the dust, and made no wishes at all. Part 3, no questions, just warmth. The second time Claire found herself at Tom Dyer's barn, it wasn't by accident. 3 days had passed since the dust storm. 3 days of scrubbing linens until her hands cracked and bled. 3 days of mending other people's clothes by lamplight until her eyes burned. 3 days of lying awake, thinking about a man who asked real questions and didn't flinch at the answers. She told herself she was just returning his kindness. The small basket she carried, 2 fresh rolls from the bakery, still warm, was merely courtesy. Proper thanks for shelter given. Nothing more. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as she approached his property. No storm drove her steps this time. just her own feet making the choice to turn down the dirt path toward the barn. She could hear the ring of hammer on metal before she saw him, rhythmic and steady like a heartbeat. He was at the forge beside the barn, shirt sleeves rolled up despite the cool air, working a piece of iron with focused intensity. Sweat gleamed on his forearms, and Claire found herself stopping to watch the easy strength in his movements, the way he made the brutal work look almost graceful. "Wasn't expecting to see you again so soon," he said without turning around. "Or at all, truth be told." Heat crept up her neck. "I brought bread, to thank you properly." He set down the hammer, wiped his hands on a leather apron. When he faced her, his expression was unreadable as always. "Didn't do anything worth thanking." "You fed a stranger. That's worth something." "Fed myself. You just happened to be there." She might have been offended by another man's dismissal, but something in Tom's tone suggested he was uncomfortable with gratitude rather than dismissive of it. She set the basket on a nearby stump. "Well, now you have fresh bread for the next time you feed yourself." He studied the basket, then her, with those winter-gray eyes. "You walked all the way out here to bring me bread." The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to address. Claire smoothed her skirts, a nervous gesture she thought she'd outgrown. "I needed the air. The boarding house can be confining." He moved to the water barrel, splashed his face and arms. "How's the work treating you?" "It's work." She watched him dry off with a piece of sacking, noticed a fresh cut on his left hand. "You're bleeding." He glanced down, shrugged. "Forge bites sometimes. Part of the job." "It needs cleaning. Do you have—" "I'm fine." "You're stubborn." The words came out sharper than intended. "Infection doesn't care how tough you are." They stared at each other for a moment, and Claire wondered if she'd overstepped. Then something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening. "There's carbolic and clean cloth inside, if it matters that much to you." She followed him into the barn, noting the small changes since her last visit. The makeshift living area looked more organized. A new shelf held books, unexpected in a place like this. The cot had an additional blanket, thick wool that would ward off the coming winter. He sat on a crate while she cleaned the cut, neither speaking. His hands were calloused but clean, nails trimmed short, working hands, but careful ones. The cut wasn't deep, but she took her time, aware of his steady breathing, the way he held perfectly still for her ministrations. "You've done this before," he observed. "My husband was careless with tools." The half-truth came easily. Samuel had been careless with many things, including his fists. A lucky man to have someone to patch him up. She tied off the bandage, perhaps tighter than necessary. He didn't see it that way. Tom flexed his fingers, testing the binding. "His loss, then—" The simple statement carried more weight than any flowery sympathy could have. Claire busied herself putting away the supplies, needing distance from the unexpected warmth in her chest. "You have books," she said, desperate for safer ground. "Surprised?" "No, maybe, I don't know." She moved closer to the shelf. "Shakespeare." "Man's got to do something on long winter nights. Horses aren't much for conversation." She traced the spine of a worn volume. "Which is your favorite?" "Don't have one. Each has its purpose." He stood, moved beside her but not too close. "You read." "When I had access to books, the Whitaker farm didn't have many." He pulled out a slim volume, held it out. "Borrow this if you like. Poems. Easier to read by lamplight than the plays." Claire took the book, handled it like the treasure it was. "I couldn't." "You could. Books are meant to be read, not collected." He turned away, began tidying tools that didn't need tidying. "Besides, gives you a reason to come back, to return it." The words hung in the air like an invitation. Claire clutched the book to her chest, suddenly aware of the impropriety of being here. alone with a man who wasn't her husband. But propriety had died with Samuel, maybe before. I should go. Mrs. Eliza will wonder. She wondering already. I expect. Woman keeps track of everyone's comings and goings, part of her charm. You know her well. She tried to marry me off to her niece 2 years back. Sweet girl, but timid as a rabbit. Would have been miserable out here. He paused, something flickering across his face. Course, that was before. Before? Such a small word to carry so much weight, Claire wanted to ask. Wanted to know what had changed him from a man who might court a timid niece to one who lived alone with horses. But she recognized the wall in his voice, the same one she built when people asked about Samuel's death. Thank you for the book, she said instead. I'll take good care of it. I know you will. She was at the barn door when he spoke again. Claire! She turned. He stood in the lamplight, a solid figure against the gathering dusk. You need anything. Work gets too hard. Town gets too small. Whatever, you come here. No questions, no expectations. Just... He gestured vaguely. Sometimes people need a place to breathe. Her throat felt tight. When had anyone last offered her sanctuary without conditions? That's kind of you. It's not kindness. It's... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. It's just what it is. She left then, book pressed against her ribs, bread basket forgotten on the stump. The walk back to town felt shorter than the walk out. Or maybe she was just moving faster, trying to outpace the feeling blooming beneath her breastbone. Mrs. Eliza was indeed waiting, rocking on the porch despite the cool evening. Her sharp eyes took in the book, the flushed cheeks, the way Claire moved like someone caught between running and staying. Nice evening for a walk, the older woman observed. Yes. Tom Dyer's good people. Bit broken since the fire took his Mary, but good people nonetheless. Mary? The name hit Claire like cold water. Of course there'd been someone. A woman who'd lived in the house that burned, who'd left him with ghosts and empty stalls and a cot in a barn. I just went to thank him for the other day. Mrs. Eliza's rocking chair creaked a steady rhythm. None of my business, of course. Just remember, broken people can recognize each other easy enough, but fitting broken pieces together is harder than it looks. Sometimes the edges are too sharp. Sometimes they don't match at all. Claire climbed the stairs to her room, the poetry book heavy in her hands. Through her window, she could see the distant glow of a forge fire. He was working again, probably through the night, hammering iron into shapes that made sense. She lit her lamp, opened the book at random. The poet spoke of love and loss, of seasons changing, of hope found in unexpected places, words written by someone long dead, in a place far away, but somehow speaking directly to her heart. Somewhere out there, a broken man was reading the same poets by lamplight, finding his own meanings in the carefully crafted lines. Tomorrow, she'd go back to her washing and mending. He'd go back to his forge and his horses. But tonight, they shared this words on a page, a bridge across the careful distance between them. Claire read until her eyes grew heavy, then placed the book beneath her pillow like a talisman. In her dreams, she wasn't running from or to anything. She was just standing still in a barn that smelled of hay and horses, while someone nearby worked iron into something new. When she woke, her first thought was of the bandage on his hand, whether he'd keep it clean and changed. Her second was that she'd forgotten to take her basket. She'd have to go back for it. Tomorrow, maybe, or the day after. It wasn't an excuse, she told herself. Just practicality. But her heart knew better, even if her mind wasn't ready to admit it yet. In a town like Red Willow, where everyone watched everyone and gossip spread like wildfire, she was walking a dangerous line. But danger felt different now, less like a threat and more like possibility. She rose, washed her face with cold water, prepared for another day of other people's laundry. But first, she opened the poetry book again. reading by dawnlight about broken things made whole, about warmth found in unexpected places. Somewhere, a forge was already ringing. Somewhere, a man was talking softly to horses who knew all his secrets. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the guilt and grief and carefully constructed walls, Claire Whitaker began to thaw. Part 4, I Ain't Your Savior. The confrontation came 2 weeks later, on a day when autumn showed its teeth. Claire had fallen into a pattern work at the hotel, mending in the evenings, and twice-weekly visits to Tom's barn, always with an excuse, returning the poetry book, bringing fresh bandages for his perpetually nicked hands, sharing bread when she had extra. They'd developed a rhythm of careful conversation, dancing around the edges of their respective darkness. But patterns attract attention in small towns. She was carrying water from the well behind the boarding house when Jacob Marsh cornered her. He smelled of whiskey, though it was barely noon, and his eyes held the kind of mean interest that made her skin crawl. "Widow Whitaker," he drawled, blocking her path. "Heard you've been spending time out at Dyer's place." "I don't see how that's your concern, Mr. Marsh." "Everything's my concern when it comes to protecting the virtue of our town." His smile was all teeth, no warmth. Man like Dyer, living alone since his woman burned up. Well, people talk. Wonder what kind of comfort he's finding with another man's widow. Claire's hands tightened on the water bucket. People with nothing better to do often talk, "Excuse me." But when she tried to pass, he grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to make his point. "Careful. Widow, this town's got standards. We don't take kindly to loose women. Let go of me, or what you'll run to your cowboy." His breath was hot on her face. Maybe I should pay him a visit. Remind him what happens to men who forget their place. The threat chilled her more than his touch. She'd seen what men like Marsh could do when they gathered their courage in numbers. But before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "Problem here." Tom stood at the corner of the building, deceptively casual, but Claire saw the coiled tension in his shoulders, the way his hand rested near his hip where she knew he carried a knife. Marsh released her arm, stepped back with false joviality. "Just having a friendly chat with the widow. No harm meant. Didn't look friendly from where I'm standing. Now, Dyer, no need for—" "There's every need." Tom moved closer, and though he was lean where Marsh was bulky, something in his presence made the bigger man retreat another step. "The lady said to let go. In my book, that ends the conversation." Marsh's face flushed ugly red. "Defending your woman. Are you guess the talk's true then?" "Only truth here is you're drunk and bothering a lady going about her business. That ends now." They stared at each other, a challenge hanging in the air like smoke. Then Marsh spat to the side, laughed without humor. "This isn't over. Dyer, you or your whore." Tom moved so fast Claire barely saw it. One moment Marsh was sneering. The next, he was against the wall with Tom's forearm across his throat. "You want to call me names? You go ahead," Tom said quietly. "But you speak about her like that again, and we'll have more than words between us." "Understood." Marsh wheezed agreement. Tom held him another moment, then stepped back. The drunk man stumbled away, throwing dark looks over his shoulder. Claire realized she was shaking. The water bucket had spilled, creating mud at her feet. She stared at it, unable to process what had just happened. "You all right?" Tom's voice came gentle now, all the hardness gone. Yes, thank you. Don't thank me. This is my fault." She looked up sharply. "How is this possibly—" "Come on." He picked up her bucket, headed for the well. "Let's get you more water, then we need to talk." She followed, numbness spreading through her limbs. This was how it started. The whispers, the accusations, the slow poison of rumor that could drive a woman from town or worse. She'd been foolish to think she could escape her past by running. It always found you. one way or another. Tom filled the bucket in silence, then set it aside. "Sit," he said, indicating the wooden bench by the well. "I need to get back." "Sit, Claire." She sat. He remained standing, looking out over the prairie rather than at her. "This can't continue," he said finally. "These visits." The words hit like physical blows. "I see." "No, you don't." He turned then, and she was surprised to see anger in his eyes. Not at her, at something bigger. "I ain't your savior. Claire, can't be, won't be." "I never asked you to save me." "Don't fall for a cowboy just 'cause he gives you soup." His voice was rough. "That's what I should have said that first night. Should have sent you back to town and been done with it." The rejection stung more than it should have, more than Marsh's crude words or grabbed arm. Because this mattered. Somehow, in just a few weeks, Tom Dyer had come to matter. "I've been owned before," she said, lifting her chin. "I'm not looking to be saved, just to sleep without flinching." The words hung between them like a confession. Tom's expression shifted, something raw flashing across his features before he controlled it. "Jesus, Claire!" He sat beside her then, careful distance between them. "What did he do to you?" She almost told him, almost spilled the whole truth right there by the well, but habits of secrecy died hard. "Does it matter he's dead? I'm here. That's the only truth that counts." "It matters if you're jumping from one bad situation to another." "Is that what you think this is?" She gestured between them. "A bad situation? I think you're a woman running scared, and I'm a man with nothing to offer but a barn and bad memories." "Yeah, that sounds like a bad situation to me." The honesty of it made her throat tight. "Maybe I'm not looking for offers. Maybe I just like talking to someone who doesn't want to fix me or judge me or save me. Is that so wrong?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "No, it's not wrong. It's just dangerous. For both of us. Because of men like Marsh. Because of men like me." He stood abruptly. "I'm not a good man, Claire. I keep to myself for reasons. Good reasons." "Did you hurt her, Mary?" The name made him flinch. "No, but I didn't save her either. Couldn't save her. And I won't watch that happen again." Understanding dawned slowly. "The fire, you blame yourself." "I was in town, drinking at the Broken Wheel while my house burned with my wife inside." His voice was flat, emotionless. "By the time I saw the smoke, it was too late, nothing left but char and regret." "Tom, don't." He picked up her water bucket. "I'll carry this to your door. Then you forget about the barn, the books, all of it. Find yourself a good man who can give you a proper life, not a drunk living with horses and ghosts." She stood, anger finally breaking through the hurt. "You think you're the only one with ghosts? The only one who's failed someone they loved?" He stopped walking but didn't turn. "My baby died," she said to his back. 3 days old, born in a blizzard with no doctor, no help, just me and a husband too drunk to care. I couldn't save her either. Couldn't even keep her warm enough to see a week of life." Now he did turn, his face stricken. "So don't tell me about failure," she continued, tears coming now. "Don't tell me about guilt. I know all about watching someone die while you're helpless to stop it. But I'm still here, still trying, because what else is there?" They stood frozen, two damaged people in a dusty yard, truth hanging between them like a blade. "Claire," he started. "No, you want to push me away, fine, but not because you think you're protecting me. I've been owned, beaten, and buried a child with my own hands. I don't need protection. I need—" She stopped, unable to name what she needed. "What?" His voice was rough. "What do you need?" "To sleep without flinching," she repeated. "That's all. Just one night of sleep without seeing his face or hearing her cry. Is that so much to ask?" Something broke in his expression then. He set down the bucket, crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he just stood close enough that she could see the pain carved into the lines around his eyes. "That first night," he said quietly, "in the barn, you did sleep. I checked on you once to make sure you were peaceful. No flinching, no bad dreams I could see." The admission undid her. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the sob building in her chest. "Come to the barn tonight," he said. "After dark, bring a blanket. You can have the cot. I'll take the hay. No expectations, no questions. Just sleep. People will talk more. Let them. I'm done caring what this town thinks." He picked up the bucket again. "But Claire, this doesn't make me your savior. And it doesn't make you mine. We're just two people trying to survive the night. Nothing more." She nodded, not trusting her voice. They walked to the boarding house in silence. Mrs. Eliza watched from her window. Face unreadable. Tomorrow there would be consequences. More confrontations, more whispers, more threats. But tonight, Claire would sleep in a barn that smelled of hay and horses and safety. Tonight, she would close her eyes without fear. It wasn't salvation, it wasn't even hope. But it was something, and sometimes something was enough to keep breathing for. Part 5. Building without asking. The routine began that night and continued for 3 weeks without discussion or formal agreement. Claire would finish her work, eat a quiet supper at the boarding house under Mrs. Eliza's knowing gaze, then walk to Tom's barn as darkness fell. He'd have the cot ready with fresh hay nearby for himself. They'd exchange perhaps a dozen words about the weather, the horses, nothing of consequence, before settling into their respective spaces. And she slept, deep, dreamless sleep that had eluded her for months. By the 4th week, things had shifted without either acknowledging it. She began arriving earlier, helping with evening chores. Tom showed her how to brush down temperance, how to check hooves for stones, how to measure feed. His hands would sometimes cover hers to correct her grip on a tool, and though the touch was purely instructional, it left warmth in its wake. They ate supper together now, simple fare at his rough table. She'd bring bread from town. He'd provide dried meat and preserves from his meager stores. Conversation came easier, flowing around the sharp edges of their respective pasts. "Why horses?" she asked one evening, watching him work leather oil into a worn bridle. "They're honest. A horse won't lie to you, won't pretend to be something it's not. You treat them fair, they return it." He glanced up. "People are more complicated. Some people are simple, too simple." She thought of Samuel's straightforward cruelty, his uncomplicated appetite for control. Maybe, but simple don't mean good. He set aside the bridle. Mary was complicated. Moods like weather, sunny one moment, storm the next. Kept me guessing for 5 years. It was the most he'd said about his wife. Claire waited, sensing more. She hated it out here. Wanted to go back east, live in a proper town with proper society. I kept promising next year, after the next drive, when we had enough saved. His voice went flat. Ran out of next year's. "It wasn't your fault. The fire." "Fault don't matter much when someone's gone." He stood, busied himself with hanging the bridle. "What matters is what you do after." "And what did you do?" "Drank for 6 months. Nearly lost the ranch. Would've, if Eliza hadn't taken it upon herself to sober me up." A ghost of a smile. Woman's got away with a bucket of cold water and harsh truths. Claire could imagine it. "She seems to collect strays." "That she does." He turned back to her. "Speaking of which, you planning to stay at the boarding house permanent?" "I don't know. The work barely covers rent and food. I've been saving what I can, but—" She shrugged. "I don't know what comes next. Could use help here. The ranch, I mean—" She looked up sharply. "Tom—" "Not what you're thinking. I've got horses need tending, tack needs mending, books need keeping. Work's backing up since I'm alone. Could pay fair wages. Maybe build a proper room off the barn. Separate entrance, all proper-like. The offer hung between them, momentous in its implications. People would talk even more. They're talking now. Least this way you'd have steady work and your own space. Why? She had to ask. Why make the offer? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because you don't flinch anymore. Because Temperance trusts you. Because I'm tired of eating alone. He met her eyes. Because you're the first person since Mary died who makes me want to build something instead of just maintaining what's left. Her throat felt thick. I'm not her. I won't ever be her. Good. I don't want her. She's gone. His voice roughened. I'm asking Claire Whitaker if she wants a job and a room. Nothing more. Nothing less. But they both knew it was more. It was a choice. A declaration. A line in the sand that said asterisk, this matters asterisk. I'll need to give Mrs. Eliza notice. Take your time. Room won't be built for a week or two anyway. He moved toward the door. I'll walk you back. Tom, she stood, smoothed her skirts. That first night, you said you checked on me. Why? He paused at the door. You looked so lost in that hay, like you might disappear if someone wasn't watching. Couldn't let that happen. And now? Now you look found, or at least finding. They walked back in comfortable silence, her hand occasionally brushing his as they navigated the rutted path. At the boarding house gate, he stopped. Claire, one more thing. The offer comes with a condition. Her stomach tightened. Which is? No more sleeping in the barn. Once you've got a proper room, you use it. People can think what they like, but we'll know the truth. That matters. She nodded, understanding. Protection for them both. A line drawn to keep things clear. Agreed. Mrs. Eliza was waiting in the parlor, knitting needles clicking like tiny swords. Evening walk. Evening walk. Claire confirmed. The needles never paused. Tom Dyer's a good man, bit broken, like I said, but good. You could do worse. He's offered me work, at the ranch, bookkeeping and such. The needles did stop then. Eliza studied her over her spectacles. Has he now, and you're taking it? I think so, yes. Well then. The needles resumed. I'll miss having you here, but a woman needs proper work. Just remember what I said about broken pieces. Sometimes they fit together just right. Sometimes they make each other bleed. Time tells which. Claire climbed to her room, mind spinning with possibilities and fears. Change was coming, whether she was ready or not. But for the first time in months, it felt like change she was choosing rather than change forced upon her. Through her window, she could see the distant lights of the ranch. Tomorrow she'd help build something new, a room, a routine, maybe even a life. It wasn't the life she'd planned at 17, full of romantic dreams and simple hopes. But it might be something better, a life built on truth and quiet understanding, on shared silences and careful trust. She thought of Tom's hands over hers on the bridle, his matter-of-fact offer, the way he'd said she looked found. Not saved, she'd been clear about not wanting that, just found, like something misplaced that had finally made its way home. The poetry book lay on her nightstand. She opened it to a well-worn page. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Asterisk. For the first time, she understood what the poet meant. Hope wasn't grand gestures or desperate prayers. It was small things building slowly. A horse learning to trust your touch, a man offering work without conditions, a night's sleep without dreams. Tomorrow she'd start packing her few belongings. Next week, she'd have a room of her own, built by hands that had touched hers with careful kindness. And somewhere between the building and the settling, between the work and the quiet evenings, maybe she'd find what she hadn't even known she was looking for. Not salvation, not rescue, just a place to stand still and breathe. with someone nearby who understood the weight of ghosts and the slow work of learning to live with them. Claire changed into her nightgown, combed out her hair, and climbed into bed. For once, she didn't dread the coming dreams. She'd trained herself to sleep peacefully in a barn that smelled of hay and horses. Now she'd learned to carry that peace with her, building something new from the pieces of what remained. The wind rattled her window, but it sounded less like threat and more like promise. Change was coming. She was ready. Part 6. A Stranger's Whisper at the Saloon. The news traveled faster than wildfire in drought season. By the time Claire moved her belongings to the newly built room at Tom's ranch, everyone in Red Willow knew. The widow Whitaker had taken up residence at the Dyer place, separate quarters or not, tongues wagged with delicious scandal. She'd been there a week, settling into routines of ledgers and livestock. When Tom came back from town with a face like thunderclouds, "What happened?" She looked up from the account book spread across the kitchen table. He hung his hat with careful precision, movements too controlled. "Nothing that matters." "Leave it, Claire." But she'd learned to read his silences. This one vibrated with barely leashed anger. "Someone said something. About me. About us." He poured himself coffee from the pot she always kept warm now. Took a long drink before answering. "There's a stranger in town. Been drinking at the Broken Wheel, running his mouth." Her blood chilled. "What kind of stranger?" "Says he knew you from before, making claims about your husband's death." The cup in her hands began to shake. She set it down carefully, mind racing. Who could it be? One of Samuel's drinking companions. Someone from the neighboring farms. "What's he saying?" Tom's jaw worked. "Doesn't matter what filth." "It matters to me." Her voice came out sharper than intended. "What is he saying?" He met her eyes then, and she saw not judgment but concern. "Says Samuel Whitaker didn't die of fever. Says there was talk after about bruises, about you being the only one there when it happened." The room spun slightly. Claire gripped the table edge, fighting nausea. After all this distance, all this time, the past had found her anyway. "I need to know," Tom said quietly. "Not for them, for me. Did you kill your husband?" The question hung between them like a blade. She could lie, had been lying for months, but looking at this man who'd offered her sanctuary without questions, who'd built her a room with his own hands, she found she couldn't. He was drunk. The words came slowly, pulled from some deep place. More than usual, angry about the baby, about me being useless, about everything. He grabbed me by the throat, started squeezing. I pushed him, just to get him off, just to breathe. He fell backward, hit his head on the stove. Tom's expression never changed. And then I watched him die. The admission tasted like ashes. I could have gone for help, could have tried to stop the bleeding, but I sat there and watched the life leave his eyes and felt. She stopped, unable to voice what she'd felt. "Relief." Tom supplied the word softly. "You felt relief." She nodded, tears coming now. "What kind of woman does that make me?" "The kind who survived." He reached across the table, covered her trembling hands with his steady ones. "The kind who fought back when cornered. No shame in that." "The law might disagree." "The law wasn't there. I was—" At her confused look, he clarified. "I mean, I know what it's like to watch someone die and feel complicated about it. Mary and I, we fought that last morning. Ugly words about money and dreams and whose fault our unhappiness was. When I found her..." He stopped, swallowed hard. Part of me was relieved too. Relieved the fighting was over. The uncertainty done. Took me months to forgive myself for that feeling. "Did you forgive yourself?" "Working on it. Maybe that's all we can do, keep working on it." They sat in silence, hands still touching across the table. "Finally," Claire asked, "what do we do about this stranger?" "Nothing. Let him talk." Town's already made up its mind about us anyway." He squeezed her fingers gently. "But Claire, if he comes here, if he threatens you directly, I'll handle it. That's not negotiable. I won't have you fighting my battles." "Not fighting, protecting what's mine." He caught himself, color rising. "The ranch. I mean, you're under my protection as an employee. That's all." But they both knew it was more, had been more since that first night in the barn. "Maybe I should leave," she said, "before this gets worse, before you get dragged down with—" "No." The word came firm. "Final. Whatever happened before, you're here now. That's all I need to know." Someone knocked at the door then, hard and insistent. They both tensed. Tom rose, hand moving to the rifle by the door. "Who is it?" "Sheriff Watson. Need a word? Dyer." Tom glanced at Claire, a silent question. She nodded, chin up. Whatever came next, she'd face it. The sheriff entered, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable. Behind him stood a man Claire recognized with sinking dread. Luther Briggs, Samuel's sometime drinking partner, a mean piece of work even sober. "Mrs. Whitaker," Luther said, smile oily. "Been looking for you." "Can't imagine why," she managed. "Can't you? Thought you might want to know? Samuel's mother is offering a reward for information about her son's death. Seems she never believed that fever story." His eyes glittered with malice. "Course, I told her what I knew. About the fights, about Samuel's temper, about yours." Sheriff Watson cleared his throat. "Now, Luther, we've been through this. Without proof." "Oh, I ain't saying she murdered him. Just saying it's interesting how she ran so quick after, how she set herself up nice here with another man's protection. Almost like she planned it." Tom stepped forward. "You've said your piece. Now get off my land." "Public road ends at your gate. I've got a right—" "You've got nothing." Tom's voice carried quiet menace. "Whatever game you're playing, whatever money you're hoping to squeeze from this situation, it ends now." Luther's smile widened. "Defending your woman. Dyer, how noble. Wonder if you'd feel the same if you knew the whole truth. I know what I need to know. Do you know about the bruises on Samuel's throat? The ones she put there defending herself?" Luther's voice dripped false sympathy. "Oh, wait, that's not how she tells it. Is it in her version? She's the victim. Poor, helpless Claire." Claire stood then, surprising everyone. "You're right, there were bruises on his throat, just like there were bruises on mine, hidden under high collars. Just like there were bruises on my ribs, my arms, everywhere he could mark me where it wouldn't show." The room went silent. "You want the truth, Luther." "Yes, I pushed him. Yes, he died. And yes, I ran because I knew no one would believe a woman who defended herself against a man everyone liked. A man who bought drinks and told jokes and only showed his real face behind closed doors." Sheriff Watson shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, are you confessing to—" "I'm confessing to surviving." She met his eyes steadily. "If that's a crime, then arrest me. But know this, I'll tell the whole truth. Every beating, every threat, every night I thought he'd finally kill me. See how Samuel's mother likes hearing that about her precious son." Luther's face had gone red. "You can't prove any of that." "Can't I check with Doc Morrison back home? He treated me twice for accidents. Ask the minister's wife who gave me salve for bruises she pretended not to see. Samuel wasn't as careful as he thought." Tom moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she felt his warmth. "Sheriff, seems to me this is all past business from another jurisdiction, unless Mrs. Whitaker's committed a crime in Red Willow. I don't see what concern it is of yours." Watson looked relieved. "That's true enough, Luther, without formal charges from back east. This is just gossip, and I don't deal in gossip." "This ain't over," Luther snarled. "Mrs. Whitaker will want justice for her son." "Then let her come." Claire said, "Let her come and hear what her son really was." Luther left then, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Sheriff Watson lingered, hat turning in his hands. "Ma'am, I'm not unsympathetic, but if formal charges come..." "I understand. Tom, keep things quiet out here. Town's already talking. Don't give them more fuel." "Noted." After the sheriff left, Claire sank into a chair, strength suddenly gone. Tom knelt beside her, not touching, just present. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing with me. Told you, whatever happened, you're here now." He paused, then added so softly she almost missed it. "That's all that matters to me." She looked at him then, this man who'd taken her word over accusations, who'd stood as her shield without question. Something passed between them, unnamed but undeniable. "It might get worse," she warned. "If Margaret Whitaker gets involved, then we'll face it, together, if you'll stay." The word hung between them, together. Not employer and employee, not even friends. Something more, something growing between the careful boundaries they'd set. "I'll stay," she said. He nodded, stood, moved to the stove. "I'll make fresh coffee. You get back to those books. Ranch won't run itself." Normal words, normal actions. But underneath, a foundation laid. Whatever came next, gossip, accusations, the past refusing to die, they'd weather it. Together. Part 7. The night he could have touched her. The storm came without warning on a November night. 3 weeks after Luther Briggs had slinked back to wherever rats like him nested. Claire woke to thunder that shook the walls of her small room. Lightning illuminated everything in stark. Terrifying flashes, the neat desk where she kept Tom's books, the narrow bed, the door that led to her private entrance. Another crack of thunder, closer this time, and suddenly she was back in that farmhouse. Samuel raging like the storm itself, furniture crashing, her baby crying. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the memories came anyway. The last night, the lamp crashing, Samuel's hands at her throat, the sickening sound when he fell. Thunder again, so loud it seemed to split the sky. And then, horrifyingly, a crashing from above, the roof of her room giving way under the assault of wind and rain. Water poured through, soaking her bed, her belongings, everything. She scrambled from bed, grabbed what she could, and ran for the main part of the barn where the horses were stabled. Her nightgown was soaked through in seconds, her hair plastered to her face, bare feet slipping on wet ground. "Tom," she pounded on the door to his quarters. "Tom, the roof!" He was there before she could finish, fully dressed as if he hadn't been sleeping. One look at her, soaked, shaking, wild-eyed with more than cold and understanding, crossed his face. "Come on." He guided her inside, grabbed a blanket from his trunk. "You're all right, just a storm." But she wasn't all right. The thunder crashed again, and she flinched hard, a sob escaping before she could stop it. Her whole body shook, caught between past and present, unable to separate the two. "Claire," his voice was steady, calm. "Look at me. You're safe. You're here, not there." She tried to focus on his face, but lightning flashed again, and suddenly it was Samuel's face, twisted with rage, coming for her. "I can't," the words came out broken. "I can't stop seeing." "Shh." He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, careful not to touch her directly. "Sit, breathe. It's just weather." But her legs wouldn't hold her. She sank onto his cot, hunched into herself, trying to become small enough that the memories couldn't find her. The storm raged outside, each thunderclap sending fresh tremors through her body. Tom lit a lamp, then busied himself making coffee, giving her space while staying close. When he finally approached, he held out a cup. "Drink. It'll help warm you." Her hands shook too badly to hold it. He set it aside, crouched in front of her, still not touching. "Talk to me. What are you remembering?" "The last night. With Samuel, there was a storm. She forced the words out between chattering teeth. He was drunk, angry about money, about the baby, about me. The thunder made him worse. Said it was God's judgment on us both. It wasn't. He threw things, broke the lamp. I tried to run, but he caught me. Her hand went unconsciously to her throat. That's when I pushed him. During the thunder, no one heard him fall. Tom's face was carved from stone, but his eyes held nothing but understanding. You defended yourself. I was so scared. Not of him dying, of him living, of what he'd do when he got up. Fresh tears came. What kind of person thinks that? The kind who's been hurt too long. Thunder crashed again. She jerked, a whimper escaping. Tom made a decision. Come here. He sat beside her on the cot, careful to leave space between them. You need to get warm and calm. Storm won't last forever. She wanted to be strong, independent, needless. But the storm and memories had stripped her down to nothing but fear and cold. When he opened his arm, offering shelter without demanding it, she crumbled. She pressed against his side, face hidden in his shoulder, while he held perfectly still. One arm around her, secure but not confining. His other hand stayed visible on his knee. No threat, no demand, just presence. I've got you, he murmured. Storm can't hurt you. He can't hurt you. You're safe. Slowly, so slowly, the shaking eased. His warmth seeped through the wet nightgown and blanket. His steady breathing gave her something to match her own too. When thunder rolled again, she still flinched but didn't break. They sat like that for eternal minutes, until she became aware of impropriety. A woman in only a nightgown, pressed against a man not her husband. But when she tried to pull away, he spoke. Stay, please, just until the storm passes. So she stayed, letting exhaustion win over propriety. Her eyes grew heavy despite the occasional thunder. She should go, should maintain boundaries, should... Sleep, he said quietly. I'll watch the storm. I can't keep taking from you. You're not taking, you're sharing. There's a difference. He shifted slightly, settling them both more comfortably. Sleep, Claire. She meant to argue, to insist on returning to her flooded room. Instead, she found herself drifting, feeling safer than she had in years. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was his voice, so soft she might have dreamed it. Sleep next to me and I'll never touch another woman. She wanted to respond, to ask what he meant, to say something back, but exhaustion won, pulling her under into blessed darkness where storms couldn't reach. When she woke, pale dawn light filtered through the windows. She was alone on the cot, fully covered with 2 blankets. Tom sat at his small table, coffee in hand, reading one of his books. Fully dressed, hair damp as if he'd been outside. The storm, she asked, voice rough with sleep. Passed around 3. Your room took damage, but it's fixable. Few days' work at most. He didn't look up from his book. Coffee's hot. She sat up, acutely aware of her state of undress beneath the blankets. Tom, last night. Storm was bad. Roof gave way. You needed shelter. He turned a page. Nothing more to it than that. But there was more. The memory of his words, whispered like a vow. The way he'd held her, protective without being possessive. The careful distance he maintained now, rebuilding the boundaries Dawn demanded. Thank you, she said simply. Now he did look up. For what? For understanding the difference between fear and invitation. For being safe. Something flickered in his eyes. Every man should be that basic decency, not something worth thanking. In my experience, few men know the difference. Then your experience has been with the wrong men. He stood, refilled his cup. Get dressed. I'll start fixing your roof. Can't have my bookkeeper catching cold. She gathered her courage. What you said last night, did you mean it? He went still, back to her. "You heard that?" "Yes." Silence stretched between them. Then, quietly, every word. "Tom, get dressed. Claire, we've got work to do." She recognized the wall going up, the careful distance being reestablished. But she also recognized what it cost him. So she gathered the blankets around herself and stood. "Coffee first," she said, matching his practical tone. "Then breakfast. Then we fix the roof. Together." He turned then, surprise flickering across his features. "You don't know anything about roofing." "I can learn. I'm good at learning." They looked at each other across the small space. Two damaged people navigating carefully around growing feelings neither was ready to name. Then Tom smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "Yeah," he said softly. "You are." Claire smiled back, then padded to the corner where he'd hung a curtain for privacy. As she dressed in clothes he must have salvaged from her room. She thought about vows made in darkness, about storms weathered together, about the difference between taking and sharing. Outside, the world sparkled wet and clean in the morning sun. Damage could be repaired, roofs could be rebuilt, and sometimes, just sometimes, broken people could help each other heal without fixing, could offer shelter without owning. She emerged dressed and ready for work. Tom handed her coffee without comment, but their fingers brushed in the exchange. Neither pulled away. "Nice morning," she observed. "It is," he agreed. And it was. Storm passed. Fears faced, boundaries maintained, but somehow gentler than before. They worked side by side through the day, fixing what the storm had broken, building it back stronger than before. That night, she slept in the main house's spare room while hers dried out. But she slept peacefully, knowing he was near, knowing she was safe. The vow he'd made hung between them unacknowledged but undeniable, a promise that asked nothing in return, that simply was, *sleep next to me and I'll never touch another woman. She didn't know what to do with such a gift, but maybe she didn't have to do anything. Maybe it was enough to simply accept it, to let it exist between them like morning coffee and shared work and careful, growing trust. Maybe that was enough. For now. Part 8, She's Trouble, said the town. The whispers started at Miller's General Store and spread like spilled molasses through Red Willow's streets. Claire had gone to town for supplies and fabric to make new curtains for her repaired room. What she found instead was a wall of turned backs and pointed silence. Women who had nodded politely before now clutched their shopping baskets and hurried past. Men who had tipped their hats now stared openly, assessment in their eyes. At the fabric counter, she selected a simple blue calico, trying to ignore Mrs. Peterson and Mrs. Clark whispering behind their gloved hands. Brazen as brass, shopping like nothing's happened. Living in sin with that Dyer man, and him defending her against poor Luther Briggs. Heard she bewitched him. Why else would a man protect a murderess? Claire's hand stilled on the fabric, but she forced herself to continue browsing. She'd weathered worse than gossip. Mr. Miller took her money with obvious reluctance, counting her change twice as if expecting it to be tainted. As she gathered her purchases, the bell above the door chimed. The entire store fell silent. Margaret Whitmore swept in, the mayor's wife, Red Willow's self-appointed guardian of morality. Her steel-gray hair was perfectly coiled, her black bombazine dress speaking of wealth and respectability. Two younger women flanked her like attendants at court. Mrs. Whitaker, the name dripped ice. How unexpected to see you in town. Claire straightened her spine. I have business here, same as anyone. Do you? Margaret's smile could have curdled milk. How interesting. I would have thought you'd have the decency to conduct your business elsewhere. Considering what exactly? Don't play innocent. Girl, the whole town knows what you are. What you did. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. Thomas Dyer might be fool enough to harbor a husband killer, but this town has standards. Standards? Claire let the word hang. Like turning a blind eye when bruises showed, like pretending not to hear cries in the night. Those kinds of standards. Margaret's face flushed. How dare you? I dare because I have nothing left to lose. Claire gathered her parcels. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. But Margaret moved to block her path. Work. Is that what you call it? We have other names for women who trade on their charms. The slap of the words made Claire flinch, but before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. That's enough, Margaret. Mrs. Eliza stood in the doorway, diminutive but fierce. Behind her, surprisingly, stood two other women, Doc Morrison's wife, Helen, and the minister's wife, Ruth Carey. Margaret's eyes narrowed. Eliza, I might have known you'd defend her. You always did collect strays. I collect people worth collecting. Eliza moved to Claire's side. Unlike some who collect only spite and self-righteousness. She's a danger to this community? The only danger here is a mob mentality led by bored women with too much time and too little charity. Helen Morrison stepped forward. I've held my peace long enough, but I won't stand by while you persecute a woman for surviving. Margaret's attendants gasped. Ruth Carey spoke quietly but firmly. Judge not, Margaret, lest ye be judged. You're defending a murderess. I'm defending a woman who did what she had to do. Helen's medical training showed in her clinical tone. I've seen enough broken bones and mysterious bruises to know when a woman's been pushed past endurance. The store had become a battlefield. Invisible lines drawn. Claire stood at the center, overwhelmed by unexpected allies even as others shrank away. Margaret's voice rose. You'll regret this, all of you, when she shows her true nature. Her true nature. A new voice from the door. Tom Dyer filled the entrance, hat in hand but authority in every line. Which nature would that be? The one that tends my horses with patience, keeps my books with honesty, or maybe the nature that works from dawn to dusk without complaint? Mr. Dyer. Margaret's tone could have frozen hell. Your judgment is clearly compromised. My judgment is fine. It's my tolerance for bullies that's compromised. He moved to Claire's side, not touching but undeniably asterisk with asterisk her. Mrs. Whitaker is my employee, under my protection. Anyone has a problem with that. They can take it up with me directly. Protection? Margaret spat the word. We all know what kind of protection you're offering. Tom's face went dangerously still. Careful, ma'am. Your husband's political ambitions might suffer if his wife is known for spreading slander. The threat hung in the air. Margaret's face went white, then red. This isn't over. The decent people of this town? The decent people of this town are right here. Eliza interrupted. Standing with someone who needs standing with. The rest are just noise. Margaret swept out, her attendants scurrying after. The store erupted in buzzing conversation. Claire felt the room spinning slightly, overwhelmed by the confrontation and its unexpected outcome. Come on, Tom said quietly. Let's get you home. I can manage. I know you can, but you don't have to. Not alone. They left together, aware of eyes following their every step. Helen Morrison pressed Claire's hand as she passed. I should have spoken sooner. I'm sorry. Thank you. Claire managed. Outside, she gulped the cool air gratefully. Tom loaded her purchases into the wagon he'd apparently brought to town. His movements were controlled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. You didn't have to do that, she said as they drove out of town. Yes, I did. It'll make things worse for you. Your reputation. My reputation died with Mary. What I have now is what I built after. And I built it on keeping to myself and protecting what's mine. That word again, mine. I'm not. You are. He glanced at her, something fierce in his eyes. Not the way they think, not owned or kept, but mine to protect, mine to stand with, if you'll allow it. Her throat felt tight. Why? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because you make me want to be worth standing with too. First time in 2 years I've cared what anyone thought of me, what you think of me. Tom, don't say anything, not yet, just let me do this. Let me stand between you and them until they find something else to gossip about. And if they don't, then we'll face that too, together. That word again. Together. It was beginning to feel less like a possibility and more like a promise. They rode in silence back to the ranch, but it was a comfortable silence, born of understanding. Inside, Claire put away her purchases while Tom tended the horses. Normal activities that felt anything but normal after the morning's confrontation. When he came in for coffee, she had it ready. They sat at the kitchen table, steam rising between them. Mrs. Morrison and Mrs. Carey, I didn't expect them to defend me. Good people sometimes surprise you. Just takes courage to stand against the crowd. Like you did. That wasn't courage. That was... He struggled for words. That was just right. Couldn't stand there and let them tear you apart. Not when I know the truth. You know my truth. But what about yours? What happened with Mary? The fire people must have talked then too. His hand tightened on his cup. They did. Said I was drunk, careless. Said I should have been home. All true enough. But not the whole truth. No. He stood, paced to the window. The whole truth was Mary set that fire herself. On purpose. Claire's breath caught. Tom. She'd been talking about it for weeks. How trapped she felt. How she'd rather burn than spend another winter here. I thought it was just talk, her dramatic way. His voice went flat. Came home from town to find the house ablaze. Tried to get to her, but the smoke found her in our bed. She'd drunk laudanum first. Wanted to make sure. Oh, Tom. Left a note. Said she was sorry but couldn't stay. Couldn't be a rancher's wife anymore. Couldn't be my wife. He turned back, eyes bleak. I burned the note. Let people think what they wanted. Seemed kinder to her memory. But not to yours. My memory didn't matter. I failed her. Failed to see how desperate she was. Failed to give her the life she needed. He sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. So when people whisper about you, about choices made in desperation, I understand. Sometimes there are no good choices. Just surviving or not. Claire reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. She made her choice, just like Samuel made his. We don't have to carry their choices forever. Don't we? No, we carry our own, and I choose to be here. Choose to work this ranch, face this town, build something despite them all. She squeezed his hand. Choose to stand with you too, if you'll have me. He turned his hand palm up, laced their fingers together. Already said you're mine to protect. Guess that means I'm yours too, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything, she said simply. They sat like that, hands linked across the table, while the afternoon sun slanted through windows she'd soon cover with new curtains. Outside, the town might whisper and judge, but here, in this kitchen built from ashes and determination, two broken people were choosing to stand together. It wasn't a declaration of love. Neither was ready for that. But it was a declaration nonetheless of partnership, of mutual protection, of facing whatever came next as one unit instead of two isolated souls. Margaret Whitmore and her ilk could say what they wanted. Claire had survived worse than gossip, and now she had something she'd never had with Samuel, someone who stood beside her instead of over her, who offered protection without ownership. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The town's judgment wouldn't disappear overnight. But for today, she had work to do, a home to tend, and a man who saw her truth without flinching. It was more than enough. It was everything. Part 9, The Committee's Visit. They came on a Tuesday afternoon, when the December sky hung low and gray with the promise of snow. Claire saw them through the kitchen window, 5 riders approaching in formation, dark coats and determined faces. She recognized Mayor Whitmore's distinctive gray beard, Sheriff Watson's reluctant posture, and 3 members of the town council, an official delegation. "Tom," she called quietly. He was mending harness in the barn. "We have company." He emerged, took one look at the approaching riders, and his face went hard. "Get inside." "No." She stood straighter. "Whatever this is, we face it together." He looked like he wanted to argue, but the riders were already at the gate. Mayor Whitmore dismounted first, the others following his lead. They approached with the grave dignity of men on distasteful but necessary business. "Dyer, Mrs. Whitaker." The mayor's tone was formally polite. "We need to speak with you both." "Then speak," Tom said. He didn't invite them in. Whitmore cleared his throat. "The town council has been discussing the situation, the moral implications of your current arrangement." "Our arrangement is employer and employee," Tom stated flatly. "Nothing immoral about honest work." "Come now, Dyer, we're all adults here." Councilman Harris, a banker with soft hands and harder eyes, smiled thinly. "A young widow living on your property, regardless of separate quarters. Surely you can see how it appears. I see gossips making assumptions about things that don't concern them. Everything that affects this town's reputation concerns us." Whitmore pulled a folded paper from his coat. "We've drawn up a proposal, a solution that protects everyone's interests." Claire felt dread pool in her stomach as he unfolded the document. "A Mrs. Whitaker will relocate back to town immediately. The council will arrange respectable employment, perhaps as a seamstress for Mrs. Peterson. In return, we'll ensure no formal investigation into the circumstances of your husband's death reaches the authorities back east." The blood drained from Claire's face. "You're blackmailing me." "We're offering a compromise." Harris's smile never wavered. "Surely you can see the wisdom in accepting. And if I refuse," Sheriff Watson shifted uncomfortably, "then I'd be obligated to write to the sheriff in your former county, make inquiries, due diligence and all that." Tom stepped forward. "You bastards! Using the law to—" "The law is clear," Whitmore interrupted. "Suspicious deaths require investigation. We've been lenient so far, out of Christian charity. But if Mrs. Whitaker insists on flouting convention, living in sin—" "Enough." Tom's voice was deadly quiet. "Get off my land." "Now, Dyer." "I said get out, now. Before I forget, I'm trying to be civilized." Harris sneered. "Threatening the town council. That's a mistake, Dyer. We have influence. We could make things very difficult for you. Loans called in, contracts canceled." "Try it," Tom said simply. "See how far you get." The tension crackled between them. Then Claire stepped forward, surprising everyone. "May I see this proposal?" Whitmore handed it over, pleased. She read it carefully, aware of Tom's growing anger beside her. The terms were worse than stated, not just relocation, but a list of behavioral requirements that amounted to social exile. No contact with Tom, limited movement, essential house arrest under the guise of protection. "I need time to consider," she said carefully. "Of course." Whitmore's satisfaction was obvious. "Shall we say 48 hours after that? We'll need to take formal action." They left with barely concealed triumph. Claire waited until they were out of sight before her knees gave way. Tom caught her, guided her to the porch steps. "Claire—" "They'll do it," she said numbly. "They'll bring charges. I'll hang." "No." His hands gripped her shoulders. "I won't let that happen." "You can't stop it. They have the law, the influence." "Then we leave. Tonight. Pack what you need. We'll head west. California. Oregon. Somewhere they can't reach." She looked at him in wonder. You'd give up your ranch, everything you've built. It's just land. Buildings can be replaced. Tom, no, I won't let you sacrifice. It's not a sacrifice if I'm choosing it. He cupped her face gently. Claire, listen to me. These past months, having you here, it's the first time since Mary died I've felt alive. Not just existing, but living. You think I'd trade that for some acres and cattle? Tears spilled down her cheeks. You don't even know if I'm worth it, if what we have is real or just proximity and loneliness. I know. His thumb brushed away tears. Known for weeks, maybe since that first night in the storm. Tom, I love you. The words came simple, unadorned. Not asking for it back, not asking for anything. Just want you to know, before you decide. I love you, and I'll follow you anywhere. Or stand and fight here. Your choice. She stared at him, this man offering everything with no expectation of return. And if I choose wrong, no wrong choice, just different paths. She pulled away gently, needing space to think. Inside, she paced the kitchen, mind racing, stay and fight, risking exposure and trial run and destroy Tom's life along with her own, or accept the council's terms, return to town, live in a different kind of prison. Through the window, she could see Tom by the corral, talking softly to Temperance. Even now, facing loss of everything, he was gentle with what mattered. That decided her. She found paper and ink, wrote quickly, then she went to him. I've made my choice. He turned, braced for anything. She handed him the paper. It's a letter to Mrs. Morrison and Mrs. Carey, asking them to witness a statement tomorrow. My full confession about Samuel's death, every detail, every beating that led to it, every person who knew and stayed silent. Tom's eyes widened. Claire? If the council wants to bring charges, let them, but they'll do it publicly, with the whole truth exposed. Let's see how Margaret Whitmore enjoys having her Christian charity examined in court. They might still prosecute. They might, but I'm done running, done hiding. She met his eyes. You said I had to choose. I choose to stand and fight, here, with you, if you'll have me. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, pulled her close, not kissing, just holding, as if she might disappear. Always, he said against her hair. Always have you. They stood like that until the sun began to set. 2 people choosing each other over safety, over convention, over fear. That night, Claire packed her belongings again, not to run but to move them into the main house. If the town wanted to talk, let them. Come morning, she'd meet whatever came with truth as her weapon and Tom at her side. As she carried her few possessions across the yard, snow began to fall, the first of winter, covering the ground in pristine white. A clean slate, she thought, or a shroud. Time would tell which. Tom met her at the door, took her bags. You sure? I'm sure. They'll come back angry. Let them. He smiled then, the rare full smile that transformed him. That's my Claire, fighting instead of running. Asterisk, my Claire. The words warmed her more than any fire could. Inside, he'd cleared space in his room. Their room now. Simple preparations, but somehow profound. A statement louder than any words. I should tell you, she said as they prepared for bed. Backs turned for modesty. Samuel was my only, and that was duty, not choice. I know. His voice was gentle. Mary and I, we had passion but not much else. This is different. We go slow as you need, no expectations. She slipped into bed, heart hammering. He joined her, careful space between them. Then, daringly, she reached for his hand under the covers. Thank you, she whispered, for choosing me, for standing with me. Thank you, he replied, for staying, for fighting, for being worth everything I'm about to lose. You won't lose it. We won't let them win. Doesn't matter if we do. His hand squeezed hers. Already got what matters most. They lay in the darkness, hands linked, snow falling soft outside. Tomorrow would bring battles, accusations, the full weight of the town's judgment. But tonight they had this, a choice made, a stand taken, a future claimed despite all odds. Tom, she whispered. I love you too. Wanted you to know. Before whatever comes tomorrow. His hand tightened on hers, and she heard his breath catch. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Then we've already won. Rest doesn't matter. And lying there in the darkness, snow erasing the world outside, Claire found she believed him. Love wasn't salvation. She'd been clear about not needing that, but it was strength, was choosing to face the world together instead of alone. Tomorrow the committee would return, but tonight she was exactly where she belonged, beside a man who saw her truth and loved her anyway, who offered partnership instead of ownership, who would stand with her against whatever storms came next. Asterisk, sleep next to me and I'll never touch another woman. The vow he'd made echoed in the quiet room, fulfilled now in ways neither had imagined that night. Not just fidelity of body, but of spirit, choosing each other completely. Consequences be damned. Claire closed her eyes and, for the first time in memory, looked forward to dawn. Part 10. She stayed. The morning after the committee's ultimatum dawned clear and cold, the snow from the previous night sparkling like scattered diamonds across the ranch. Claire woke to the sound of someone knocking, not the aggressive pounding she'd expected from the town council, but a gentle, almost hesitant tapping. Tom was already up, pulling on his boots. Stay here, he said quietly. No. She reached for her shawl. We faced them together. Remember? But when Tom opened the door, it wasn't the committee. It was Ben Cooper, the boy from the orphanage who sometimes did odd jobs around town. His thin face was pinched with cold, his too small coat patched in multiple places. Morning, Mr. Dyer, ma'am. He shifted nervously. Mrs. Morrison sent me, said to give you this. He held out an envelope with shaking hands. Tom took it, offered the boy a coin, but Ben shook his head. She already paid me, but... He glanced at Claire. My shirt's got a terrible tear. Been trying to mend it myself, but I ain't no good with a needle. Heard tell you're right handy with sewing, ma'am. Claire's throat tightened. Such a small gesture of support, but it mattered. Bring it by any time. Ben, I'll fix it for you. The boy grinned, gap-toothed and genuine. Thank you, ma'am. Oh, and Mrs. Carrie said to tell you she's expecting you both for supper Sunday. Said she won't take no for an answer. After he left, Tom opened the letter. Inside, Helen Morrison's neat script delivered unexpected news. The council met again last night. It seems their wives had words with them about Christian charity and the throwing of stones. The formal complaint has been withdrawn. You still have enemies, but they'll move more carefully now. Stand firm. H.M. Asterisk. Claire sank into a chair, relief making her knees weak. It's over. This round. Tom set the letter aside. There'll be others. People like Whitmore don't give up easy. But we have time to prepare, to build allies. She stopped, struck by a thought. Tom, what if we did more than just defend? What if we made ourselves necessary to the town? What do you mean? You have skills, blacksmithing, horse training. I can sew, keep books, teach letters to those who need it. If enough people depend on us, they can't run us out without hurting themselves. He smiled slowly. That's clever. Claire, it's survival. But more than that, it's building a real life here. Not just existing in defiance of them, but thriving despite them. As if in answer to her words, another knock came. This time, it was Mrs. Patterson, the woman who'd whispered about Claire in the store. She stood on the porch, flour dusting her apron, looking deeply uncomfortable. That is... She took a breath. My eldest girl is getting married come spring. I need a dress made, something fine but not too dear. Heard you do good work. Mrs. Whitaker. Claire blinked, stunned. I'd be happy to help, Mrs. Patterson. The woman's rigid posture relaxed slightly. I was wrong before what I said. A woman's got a right to defend herself. Got daughters of my own. I'd want them to fight back too, if... She trailed off, then thrust a basket at Claire. Brought bread. Welcome to the ranch proper like. After she left, Claire and Tom stood in amazed silence. Then another visitor appeared, old Jim Martinez with a horse that needed its leg looked at. Then the widow Chen with fabric to be hemmed. By noon, a steady trickle of townspeople had found reasons to visit the ranch. What's happening? Claire asked, bewildered. Community, Tom said simply. The real kind, not the committee's version, but people choosing sides, choosing us. That afternoon, while Claire altered a dress for the baker's wife, Tom worked the forge, shoeing horses for ranchers who'd previously taken their business elsewhere. They worked in companionable rhythm, building something more valuable than any formal declaration could provide, a place in the fabric of daily life. As the sun began to set, Sheriff Watson rode up alone. Tom tensed, but the lawman raised a peaceful hand. Not here officially. Just wanted you to know that letter from back east. If it comes, it might just get lost. Lots of mail goes missing on the frontier. He touched his hat to Claire. Ma'am, glad you're staying. Town needs more folks willing to stand up to bullies, even when the bullies wear fine coats. He left before they could respond, but his message was clear. Not everyone who'd stood with the committee agreed with their methods. That evening, as Claire prepared supper in what was now truly her kitchen too, she found herself humming. Tom looked up from the harness he was mending. Haven't heard you do that before. She paused, realizing he was right. Haven't felt like it before. Hasn't been much music in my life lately. Maybe we should fix that. There's a dance at the church hall next month. Could go, if you wanted. Show them all we're not hiding. Dancing, she considered. I haven't danced since before I was married. Then it's time you did again. I'm not much good at it. Warn you now. But I can manage a waltz without stepping on your feet. Usually. She laughed, the sound filling the kitchen like sunshine. I'd like that, dancing with you. They ate quietly, but it was the quiet of peace rather than tension. Afterward, as Claire cleared dishes, Tom pulled out his fiddle, another surprise in a day full of them. You play? Mary hated it, said I sounded like a dying cat, but I always liked it. He rosined the bow, tuned carefully. Any requests? Anything, everything, just music. He played simple tunes, folk melodies that spoke of home and hearth. Claire found herself swaying as she worked, transported by the homely magic of music in a warm kitchen while snow fell outside. When she finally sat, task done, he switched to something slower, sweeter, a waltz. She realized, practice for that future dance. She stood, held out her hand in silent invitation. He set aside the fiddle, took her hand, placed his other carefully at her waist. They danced slowly around the kitchen. No music now but what they carried in memory. Her head found his shoulder. His chin rested against her hair. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For this, for fighting for us, for making me believe in after again. Thank you, he replied. For staying, for choosing to build instead of run, for making this house a home again. They swayed together as darkness deepened outside. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. It always did. The committee might regroup, new threats might emerge, but they'd face them as they'd learned to face everything, together, honestly, without flinching. Claire, I know we've done things backward, living together before courting proper, but I want you to know, I mean to marry you. When you're ready, if you'll have me. Want to do this right. She lifted her head, met his eyes. Yes, 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 when the time's right, when we've proven to everyone, including ourselves, that this is built on something solid. She smiled. But yes, Tom Dyer, I'll marry you, gladly. He spun her then, joyful as a boy, and she laughed again. Two damaged people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their lives, choosing to build something new and strong and true. Outside, Red Willow slept under its blanket of snow. Some there wished them ill, would always wish them ill, but others, more than they dared hope, had chosen to see past gossip to truth, past scandal to love, past judgment to grace. In the morning, Ben Cooper would bring his torn shirt. The baker's wife would need her dress fitted. Horses would need shoeing. Books would need keeping. Life would need living. Simple tasks that added up to something profound. Acceptance, community, belonging. But tonight, in a kitchen warmed by stove fire and newfound joy, Claire Whitaker and Thomas Dyer danced to silent music, celebrating not an ending but a beginning. Not a salvation but a partnership. Not a hiding place but a home. She'd started this journey running from something. She'd found herself running to something instead. And now, at last, she'd stopped running altogether. She'd stayed. And in staying, in choosing to stand and fight and build and love, she'd found what she hadn't even known she was looking for. Not just a place to sleep without flinching, but a place to live without fear, to love without reservation, to be fully and truly herself. The music of their quiet breathing filled the room. Snow continued to fall. And in a ranch house built from ashes and determination, two people held each other close and dared to believe in tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about this tale of love and redemption in the Old West. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel Wild West Stories 1850. Hit that like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover these authentic frontier stories. Your support means the world to me.